Okay, so it is now the next morning after pulling the car home on the truck, rather towing it on the back of the truck. But I've removed the DME to restore it to an older, what we would call an I-step, which is basically just the BMW's programming level or version level. Because I updated it yesterday in an attempt to try and fix the fuel pump control module. So I've downgraded it. You have to use special tools to do so. BMW's own software like ESIS won't do it. It prevents you from doing downgrades. So to pull the DME out, you've got to take the intake off. You take off here the cover around the battery strut brace that goes across the top. Obviously the intake, undo the MAF sensor. This bit here, undo your positive and negative battery terminals. And then there's a cover here, and there's a weather bracing here. This all needs to come off. And then once you take off the cover, you can pull the DME out, and then you can put it on the bench and plug it in, and with your specialized bench tools such as like B-Flash, Auto Tuner, Magic Motorsports Flex, etc. And from there you can perform backups or writes or whatever. The first thing that most people do before they do a bench flash is they make a backup of the control unit, and this is just so that you have a backup in case something goes wrong. You can try and recover the control unit, which is what I have. So I've recovered it back to March 2020 I-step after going to 2022 07. Now this DME was produced in July of 2019. So what that means is that it does not have the supplier boot from Bosch that is currently untunable and requires a femto unlock. So if you have had a dealer update to your DME and it was produced before 2020 June, you can actually still unlock it. Point in case, I did pull off the new 2022 firmware out of this and actually bench unlock it whilst I was at it, and I have a copy of it. It's still tunable. It's just mainly the Bosch supplier boot. So how these control units work is you've got an S boot and you've got your manufacturing boot. So your S boot is your supplier boot, so that's what Bosch will flash to these at the factory when Bosch makes them. Then BMW will flash their bootloader and then their software. So this sort of think of it as three things in one. And that's why it's such a pain to tune them, because it's the supplier boot that pretty much prevents people from being able to bench read and write them. So I've now put everything back together. The DME lives just under here, batteries here, batteries in the front of these cars. Unlike the previous generation where they were all in the rear, it's very mini, sort of eccentric. Strut brace, intake, MAF, all this goes back on. Torqued down, weather shielding, otherwise water will come in. That's come in, that's easy, clips on. It's got a nice little indicator here to line up the strip with the beauty covers and stuff. Okay. So, good news, we got a replacement module. The G series fuel pump control module, whilst it appears to be 100% the same, the pinout on the plug is actually slightly different. So it should work, but you'd have to rewire the pin. The DME obviously in this car is the same as what's in the G series B48, B58, S58 motors. So it's not like really there's an incompatibility between the G series fuel pump control modules and this. It's just literally the wiring is a bit different, but all the signals and the types of signal wires that are used are the same. Anyway, here's the old module, which I've delitted. This is the PCB. It's covered in some anti-tamper glue rubbish. PCB looks totally fine. Realistically, it looks like it's just some sort of a glitch with the unit being set to some sort of installation mode. So now what we're going to do is plug this in. Now to plug it in, or to even locate it, actually, it's underneath the seat here. In the car, you pull the seat up and out. Obviously my seats are covered in crap because it's been a hectic time, but what you do is you pull the seat up, you'll see the modules in here. There's these two plastic bolt things, plastic nuts. You can remove them conveniently actually with your BMW screwdriver. You undo them and then you just pull the plug off. Now to install it, literally this is how simple it is. The EKP modules for the F series cars like the N20 and 55 S55s, they actually need a bit of coating when you install them. They don't
really plug and play. Simply put that into the frame there like that. Get the blue switch, the blue plug. You got to make sure it's all the way in, and you want to make sure it's clipped in. So you can see here that it's nice and clipped in. So we're just going to put that there like that. I'm going to double check again. Don't want to make sure it doesn't come loose. And then I'm going to get these these plastic nuts. Just going to start threading them in here. And then once I've done that, where did I put this? And then we just use this. It's as simple as that. Now, sometimes, this is not very always specific to these cars, but sometimes the location of these modules, and depending on extreme use cases, can allow them to overheat because they sit underneath the seat. So we have seen in cases on other cars, sometimes, and like I said, this is very rare for you to even need to consider this, but sometimes it's actually beneficial to mount this somewhere else, like underneath the car above the fuel tank, and actually put an extension harness so that it's not against the seat, and the seat is not just adding as an insulator to increase the heat. But very rare for this to happen. And on top of that, it's mounted to the chassis of the car, and the heat sink actually goes through the chassis of the car rather than the plastic cover into the seat. We know this because if we look at the old one here, you should be able to see in there, see that pink gooey stuff? That's actually thermal compound to the back of the plate, which is pretty much a giant heatsink. So, ran a bit of info, but then we just put the seat back on, put the plugs back through, and clip it back in place. Done. I'm going to install a charge pipe. Pain in the ass to do, but as you can see, I've already gotten pretty far to installing the other charge pipe, which is just here. It's an FTP branded charge pipe. The quick disconnect clamp is all the way down here. You probably can't really see it, to be honest. Nightmare to do unless you've actually got the splash tray off and doing it underneath the car. Really hard to do to get down there. Obviously my hands are a good example of how difficult it is to get in there. This is the original factory one that we're pulling out and replacing. As you can see, the clips make it very, very difficult to remove. It's also got a notch here, so you can't actually rotate the charge pipe if you can get one side off and get the other. I had to get a screwdriver in between my two fingers like this and shove it in here to get this side off. But this side I could reach with my fingers. Up here is actually pretty easy to get off. What makes this one easy to remove is that you can squish it. The other one you can't. So I did actually have to remove the splash tray a little bit whilst the car's on the ground, and I managed to confirm that this is in place. What's a bit more problematic is obviously the throttle body, to get this other bit on to put it all back together. With this in place here, there's only that much space really to get the two remaining pieces together. I'm sure if I had done this on a hoist and put it up in place, it probably would have been easier, but anyway, here we are. So I'm gonna now try and put this bit on here. There's a lock somewhere on this. You'll know when it's in place because it'll do like a nice little click. So I believe that should be right. Shouldn't come off now. No, there we go, look at that, it's on. Now it's got to work out how to get it onto here. Probably should put this other post clamp on before I go putting it all together. Okay. No idea how the hell I'm gonna... Oh, I thought that was plugged in. Okay. Obviously, that's it there. Since they're just lazily reusing existing parts from other cars. How do I do this without breaking stuff? I should probably undo that sensor. So I'm just going to remove the mass air pressure sensor from the throttle body. Put that there for now. Almost there. Literally almost there. Man, what a joke. Probably made it 10 times harder for myself than it needs to be. Okay, at least we're like on a little bit. It's better than it was before. It's not the one I wanted. Bloody hell. Yeah, well, that doesn't help at all. Fitting, especially being it's plastic, you don't want to crack it. FTP should probably improve that design. Alright, there is one underneath that I need to get to, but that's like the hardest one to do. I think I'm in the right hole. Nope. There we go. That's it there. She started. Okay. That charge pipe is done. Now I've just got to do up the hose clamps and make sure that this is seated properly and seated in a way that we want it to be seated, so it's not putting any undue pressure in the wrong spots. Alright, I think we put those there like that. The extension on the ratchet. Now obviously when you do hose clamps up, especially over charge pipes, you really want to put it over the notch. And I can feel the notches just here. So I'm going to do this one up just here. You know that you're on the notch anyway, because when you tighten it up, the silicone will actually expand around and will leave a very obvious bulge of where the bead is. Or notch bead, whatever you want to call it. Sorry. Typically when these charge pipes blow, it's these clamps that fail. FTP haven't had the best track record for clamps in the past, but these ones look a little bit better than the last ones that we've seen, so let's roll with that for the time being. Okay, now we're going to move on to installing the FTP inlet for the turbo. Now I've removed the beauty cover here so we can see the top of the engine there. I've removed the plastic housing or shrouding from here. We don't need to really remove this. First thing we need to undo is this bolt here. Then we need to do this clamp, but this whole piece will come out anyway. Got to do the vacuum line, and then there is some sort of a clip down here on the turbo that I'm going to need to remove. So as you can see here, this is a 3D printed inlet I've designed for another project for the N20 stuff. But this is the V40 turbo, and we basically just need to pull this clip off and then that should just come off. Simple as that, that's what they say. Okay, so you take this off. You need to take this off because this is part of the PCV system, so like we install a catch can, I guess. That plugs into that little fitting. Now getting the quick disconnect clip off is a bit of a pain, but you may not be able to see it. But down there you can sort of just see down here that there is the clip, and you can sort of put a screwdriver in there and sort of pry it out. I'll just get the torch on that so you can sort of see it. It's a bit hard to see, but you should be able to just see down in there. There's a bit of a clip. Okay, so I've managed to get it up out of there. It's a bit flexible, it'll do it, but you've got to get your hand around here because on the other side of this, the wiring harness clips to this bit of plastic here, and then just on this side here, as you can see, there was a sensor wire we had to unplug. So I just pulled that up and out. And now, as you can see, she's out. Look at that. There's the turbo. So, I've managed to put the FTP inlet on. One thing I will note is that she's a bit loose on here, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. The sealing is all done on the actual turbo inlet itself, not on this bit here. As you can see in here, it's just plastic. So I don't know, it's a bit weird to be honest that it's this loose. If we get a math code, then I'll know that it needs to be changed or fixed or something. But what I have done is I've removed this bit here from the inlet, the factory inlet. As you can see, there's a bit of a noise dampening filter in there. So I've taken the clamp off, and then I'll put that clamp and try and recycle this until I can work out an inlet intake design for this car. So we've got the FTP inlet, which comes up to here for the air filter. It has an extension, like an expanding piece of silicon, but it doesn't fit over the OEM airbox. Now, obviously, I know most people probably go, oh, but you should just go on an aftermarket intake. We're going to use the OEM one for now, because we're going to design our own one, because there's not a lot of options in the market, and the ones that do look pretty alright are like really expensive, as much of as a turbo upgrade, so it's just not economical. Alrighty, we're all installed. Like I said, the FTP inlet was a bit loose on the actual turbo itself compared to the OEM one, so I'm hoping that's not going to cause any issues, but if it does, well, I guess we'll just go and design our own. Our little ghetto fix is working for now. We'll see how it goes. If it's going to cause any issues with leaks, etc., then we'll look at that at another day. We're just in a pinch because the local auto store, Super Cheap Auto for us, it was closed when we realised that this was going to be a problem. But once they open, I'll go get the right expanding piece for this until we can get around to an intake. But I mean, even still, like, they're anticipating that it would be going onto a MAF housing that's smaller than OEM, which is fair enough for other B48s. The MAF housings are a bit smaller, but on this one, she's chonky. So I still haven't installed the turbo to intercooler charge pipe. I feel like I'm missing part of it because this doesn't seem like it should be all of it. Because if you look at this intercooler turbo, like, and the factory one from here I know is a flexible one because we've used it on retrofits before. So I'm not really sure what's happening here, but not my biggest concern. I only really want to change the charge pipes purely so I had a meth bun. That was the main reason why, because the factory ones are pretty good. I mean, honestly, they're designed to take 30-something PSI factory, so factory ones are pretty good on the B48E. The inlet was probably the biggest thing, really, just from a performance point of view and a noise point of view. Intake is intake. It's not really going to make a huge difference, other than maybe sounds if I put a pod filter on it. Downpipe is on its way. Exhaust is going to be coming soon. Wheels, wrap, the whole lot.